Hey guys, tonight we trudge out of Chang'an just as dawn paints the city walls in soft apricot light, and you probably won't survive this ride without at least one stubbed toe or startled camel snort. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Post your location and local time in the chat so I know exactly where you're dozing off from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You press your palm against the mosaic of mud brick ramparts, feeling the last warmth of the early spring sun seep into your fingers. Around you, dozens of leather-clad postmen tighten straps on Bactrian saddles, their two-humped beasts grunting softly. The air carries a faint whiff of toasted millet and yak butter tea, grounding you in this moment before the caravan snakes westward. A handful of city officials stand by lacquered wooden chests, marking scrolls with ink brushes dipped in ornate porcelain dishes. An everyday scene, if you ignore the fact that these letters will traverse some of the world's most forbidding wastelands. A mainstream historical fact: the Silk Route courier system thrived under the Tang dynasty, moving messages between Chang'an, modern Xi'an, and Samarkand over 12,000 kilometers of desert and mountain passes. You can almost hear merchants counting silken bolts in their heads, while these postmen simply count camels. Historians still argue whether the Tang court subsidized camel feed or left each courier responsible for scavenging forage en route. You tug a loose strand of wool from your scarf as you watch the lead postman urge his camel forward with a gentle click of the tongue. Fringe scholars whisper that some guides carried small pouches of powdered unicorn horn, actually powdered narwhal tusk, intended as talismans against sandstorms. You arch an eyebrow. Magic or marketing gimmick? The jury is still out, you think, as the camel's breath puffs in soft white clouds against the pale sky. You probably won't survive this journey if you expect cushy campfires every night. Joke number 1, check. But for now, the first rays of sun stroke the dunes in painterly shades that soothe rather than scorch. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen rumor your friend laughed about last week, and you're glad you only packed spiced tea. At the city gate, a lone drumbeat signals departure. Postmen fling up woven flags bearing imperial seals. Their camels shuffle and snort, eager to trundle onto the open road. You take a step forward, heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and mild regret. Joke number 2. You did sign up for this. The caravan moves as one slow, rhythmic beast, leather straps creaking softly like ancient lullabies. The first miles out of Chang'an show tiered rice paddies receding into rocky flats, where sand dunes begin their silent drift. You imagine those rice farmers are long asleep by now, sipping their own butter tea, unaware of the paper scrolls gliding past their doorsteps. Joke number 3. They'll probably wake to find postcards from Bactrian beasts rather than braised duck. The trail widens as you leave cobbled lanes behind. You sense the ground shifting underfoot, fine sand mingles with gravel, and your camel hesitates, hoof sinking slightly. You pat its neck and murmur encouragement, feeling a surprising kinship with this lumbering creature. Historians still argue whether these long caravans ever exceeded 100 camels or kept a leaner profile of 30 to 50 to minimize water use. Either way, you're part of a living corridor stretching across continents, carrying whispers of empires and fresh news of festivals you left behind. As the sun climbs higher, you survey the caravan's edge, leather flasks dangling, cloth bundles of silk and spices, and lacquered boxes brimming with scrolls. Each item rides in deliberate balance atop the camel's humps, a miniature testament to careful planning and a reminder of the fragile trust between postman and camel. A single misstep could topple priceless cargo or cost precious hours. Already, you feel the gentle hum of travel lulling your thoughts. The world behind you fades. The dunes ahead promise endless horizons. And so your sleepy expedition on the Silk Route begins. One step, one grunt, one camel snort at a time. You shift your weight as the caravan grinds to a halt beside a low stone corral, where half a dozen postmen stand ready with leather lassos in calloused hands. The corral smells of hay and dust, a strangely comforting aroma that mingles wild grass with the faint metallic tang of tacked-on blinkers. Here, you learn how the secret of reliable delivery begins long before departure, in the rigorous training of Bactrian camels. A mainstream historical fact. Records from the Tang archives note that camel training compounds existed on the outskirts of Chang'an, where handlers spent months acclimating young camels to heavy loads and harsh winds. You step inside and see one beast at a time slowly donning padded saddles, each kilo of weight added in daily increments, much like an ancient weightlifter prepping for a competition. You cross your arms as a trainer whispers to a camel named Shang Lu, fragrant camel, slowly tightening straps. The camel keeps one eye half closed, exuding an air of placid indifference, as if this whole load-bearing business is beneath its dignity. Fringe lore suggests some trainers sang lullabies to these camels, believing music improved pace consistency, though most scholars dismiss it as melodramatic propaganda. Historians still argue whether melodies actually soothed the camels or simply entertained bored handlers. You squat next to a low trough, tracing the rim with a finger. The trainers insist that camels must not only bear burdens, but also respond to human cues for pace and direction. You watch as one handler flicks the tip of a slender stick and Shanglu pivots on a front hoof, shifting a saddlebag's load by a hair's breadth. It's mesmerizing. The beast moves with surprising grace, like a dancer in cumbersome boots. Nearby, a young postman balances atop another camel's hump, practicing vaulting maneuvers to simulate emergency mounts. You can't help but wince at the thought of miscalculating a leap. This is no Broadway stage. Yet the postman lands softly, patting the camel's neck in a silent thank you. You bite back a sarcastic thought about signing up for equestrian drama rather than simple mail runs. The camels must also memorize rest rhythms. Each animal is trained to sway gently for exactly 8 hours, then stand motionless for 2, before moving on. This cycle syncs with daily oasis schedules. A fringe anecdote claims an overzealous postman once tried 8-hour naps himself, but was promptly demoted to soup duty at the next caravanserai. You grin, picturing snoozing sentries and spilled broth. As the sun inches west, you perch on a saddle stand and peek at a low bundle of scrolls marked for Samarkand. The trainers explain how camels learn to nudge markers on wax tablets, tiny grooves indicating remaining days on the journey. You stretch a piece of hide between thumb and forefinger, marveling at how this simple system reduced missed deliveries by half. Historians still argue whether these carvings were standardized empire-wide or varied by regional caravanserai traditions. A breeze rustles the corral's ropes, carrying a distant clang of metal. You glance up to see a bell strapped to each camel's neck. A modern aside, really, but useful. The pendulum chime warns handlers if an animal lags or tumbles. Fringe tinkerers claim some bells were enchanted by court astrologers to ward off demons of misdirection, but you suspect a simpler origin. Noisy bells keep night watches honest. You rise and circle the corral, patting the camels' soft muzzles. Their fur is coarse, warm, and somehow reassuring under your palm, as reliable as the slow heartbeat echoing in your own chest. At the training ground's edge, a pile of dried apricots and millet waits, fuel for both camel and courier. You scoop a handful, crunching thoughtfully while you consider the bond between handler and beast. A trainer approaches and nods toward the distant dunes. "Tomorrow you'll see this in practice," he says, voice low and calm. You swallow, feeling a mix of eagerness and mild trepidation. After all, it's one thing to watch camels learn pace in a ring. It's another to trust them with imperial dispatches across a shifting sea of sand. The afternoon haze turns golden, beads of sweat glinting on the trainer's brow. You realize this endless patience, this careful calibration of temperament and technique, is the backbone of the Silk Route's reliability. You tuck that thought away, along with your last apricot, because soon you'll need every ounce of energy to stay awake when the desert night stretches its velvet cloak overhead. The sky above you shimmers with pinpricks of starlight as the caravan slows to a hush, and you notice how quiet the desert really is, except for the soft padding of camel hooves and the occasional bell's distant tinkle. You settle onto the sand beside your camel, Xianglu, whose rhythmic breathing almost lulls you into a trance. Night has fallen, and here comes the part where you probably won't fail to navigate by GPS, but instead by ancient starlight. You tilt your head back, tracing the Big Dipper's bold curve, remembering that mainstream historical fact. Silk Route postmen often used the North Star, Polaris, to maintain a steady westerly heading. crucial when landmarks vanish into dunes. Historians still argue whether they used elaborate astrolabes or relied on simpler star charts carved on wooden tablets. But either way, those twinkling guides saved more than a few mail runs from veering hopelessly off course. A fringe tidbit. Some couriers swore by the Camel's Tail constellation, a dubious grouping of stars that only appeared in particularly clear nights and supposedly mimicked a camel lying down. They'd raise a mug of lukewarm tea and toast to its lucky guidance, though most scholars treat this as romantic exaggeration, akin to naming every cloud you see. You peer through a small brass ring, a makeshift sighting device, aligning it carefully with the North Star. Your voice is barely above a whisper as you murmur the sequence of star names you memorized in Chang'an: Dubhe, Merak, Phecta. You feel like a sleepy astronomy tutor correcting your own pronunciation. Joke 1. You'd make a terrible planetarium guide. Your camel shifts its bulk, and you notice the steady sway matches a subtle beat, maybe the same tempo as the caravan's daytime pace. In fact, some postmen timed gait counts by feeling 1,000 steps between known sand ridges. Fringe scholars still argue whether these step counts were really accurate or just tales invented by bored wanderers craving structure. You yawn, thinking that if you counted steps now, you'd probably lose count at 10. Around you, torches flicker at the lead postman's saddle. You watch his silhouette as he snaps a small wooden board against his palm, chanting a mnemonic rhyme for star names. He teaches recruits in hushed tones, rotating the board, so a fresh mnemonic appears each night, like cosmic flashcards. You wonder if modern students would find this as amusing as you do. Joke 2. Flashcards in medieval times came without sticky notes. The night deepens, and the caravan's form stretches into shadow-smudged columns. You hear the distant howl of wind creeping over dunes, a gentle reminder that your improvised planetarium has no roof. You slide from the sand and test your own star chart scratched onto a leather flap. The alignments feel off by a hair. Had you mismeasured your latitude? Historians still argue whether postmen added a correction factor based on seasonal shifts or simply relied on guesswork. A curious thought drifts through your mind. What if Xianglu could read the stars? Fringe storytellers claim that camels learn constellations faster than handlers, leading to fewer detours. Though this sounds like a bedtime story, better suited for sleepy children than serious debate. You pat the camel's neck and whisper, "If only you could point me to the next oasis." Xianglu just snorts in reply. Your lantern gutters soft light over a cluster of wax calendar beads hung from the camel's saddle, reminders to check distance markers at dawn. You realize that celestial navigation and these tactile calendars formed a perfect duo. The stars set your direction, the beads measured your progress. Without either, you'd be stuck under a blanket of glittering confusion. A light breeze ruffles the leather saddlebags, carrying the scent of dried apricots and incense, an oddly soothing combination. You lean back, scanning the southern horizon where Orion's belt dips toward distant dunes. It's here, among these dusty silhouettes and celestial signposts, that you feel both infinitesimal and infinite, a cosmic postcard sent straight to your drowsy mind. Joke 3. You're out here floating on a sea of sand, using millions of miles of distance to tell you where to go next, yet you still get lost in IKEA sometimes. You chuckle quietly, the sound swallowed by the vast stillness. As you nudge Xianglu forward, murmuring the night's course, you sense the caravan heed your newfound bearing. The camels step into alignment, bells chiming in unison, like a sleepy choir on a mission. Ahead, a faint glow hints at the shimmer of a distant oasis lamp. In the silent dialogue between star and sand, you realize navigation isn't just about maps. It's an intimate relationship with the sky, the camel, and your own sense of wonder. Soon you'll trade this celestial theater for the tactile comfort of oasis stones. But for now, the stars and your loyal camel carry you onward into the soothing mystery of the night. You wake to a soft rustle as Xianglu shifts against the cool morning air, and without a word, you begin unfastening the leather straps that secure the caravan's most ingenious timekeepers, the calendar cartridges. These modest bundles of wax tablets and stitched leather strips aren't just dusty curiosities. They're the heartbeat of every mail run, ensuring you don't fib your way through the desert. A mainstream historical fact: Tang Dynasty messengers routinely carry durable leather-bound strips marking each day's progress, and archaeological digs in Dunhuang forts have unearthed dozens of these well-preserved calendars. You peel back the leather flap of your own cartridge to reveal a series of wax slots, each scored with tiny notches and painted with red ink, an ancient progress bar, essentially. Historians still argue whether these markings were standardized by imperial decree or customized by each regional caravanserai. You finger the first notch, feeling the slight groove worn smooth by repeated counting. Fringe lore suggests some postmen bake their wax tablets in scented oils, frankincense for good luck or camphor to ward off scorpions. But most academics scoff that incense simply made wax softer and more susceptible to damage. You sniff the leather anyway, catching a faint hint of resin and wind-polished sand. Pulling out a slender strip of cured hide, you see it stamped with imperial seals and divisible into 5-day sections. These strips slip into loops on your saddle, flipping like pages in a book each time you pass a known waypoint. You flip to the next segment, observing the subtle variation in the camel's pace marks, a curly flourish that denotes a rough pass versus a straight dash for flat dunes. You wonder if anyone still debates whether those flurries were purely decorative or conveyed actual terrain warnings. Historians still argue whether cursive notations signaled danger or were merely sloppy handwriting. Bent over your calendar, you recall how earlier postmen used knotted cords, like odd mesh bracelets, to tally progress, a method still favored in some remote valleys. But these leather strips, reinforced with wooden slats, proved sturdier against the relentless grind of sand and sun. Joke 1. It's the first known saddle spreadsheet, minus pie charts. You tuck the strip away and examine a compact wax tablet, its surface dotted with diminishing columns of red and black dabs. Each dab represents a night spent under open sky or a day paused at an oasis for resupply. You can almost imagine sleepy handlers leaning over flickering lanterns, tracing their fingers through the wax while murmuring deadlines under their breath. Fringe storytellers claim some scribes drew tiny camel cartoons in the margins, an early form of procrastination doodles, but serious scholars debate whether any of these actually survived or are just lively campfire anecdotes. A bird's distant call breaks your concentration. You strap the wax tablet back into its leather sheath and survey the caravan moving in slow procession along knobbly ridges. Those little notches are more than decoration. They reduce missed appointments by almost 40%, Tang records boast. You look down at your hands, imagining how many times they'll flip this cartridge over the next fortnight. Around midday, the lead postman halts the caravan by a sandstone marker carved with mile numbers. You trot your camel forward and slide the wax tablet from its case. With a practiced flick, you etch another notch into the next column, the squeezed wax hissing softly. The tablet glows amber in the sunlight as you glance sideways at your fellow couriers marking their strips. A brief sense of camaraderie ripples through the group, each notch a shared heartbeat towards Samarkand. Historians still argue whether certain way stations offered pre-engraved replacement strips or left that task solely to each courier. You recall last month's rumor that some oases provided skylight workshops for urgent repairs, but other accounts dismiss this as embellished hospitality. Either way, you're grateful for every intact notch. Sliding the tablet back, you consider the caravan's hidden coordination. Camels pause exactly when the sun dips below an imaginary line, not just when a postman decides it's tea time. Those leather strips, calibrated for seasonal sun angles, ensure you don't end up wandering until midnight. An over-eager courier in 715 reportedly mistimed a flip and overshot a water stop by 2 nights. Joke 2. Talk about running late. You store the cartridge securely beneath your cloak, appreciating its weight, a subtle reminder of time passing under your saddle. Ahead, the desert stretches in infinite waves, but this modest bundle of leather and wax keeps you anchored to an imperial schedule. As the caravan resumes its slow crawl, you allow yourself a wry smile. In a world without smartphones or GPS, you're still the reigning champion of on-time delivery. A stray breeze catches the leather, sending a tiny swirl of sand across the notch you just made. You close your eyes for a moment, recalling how each carved line represents not just days traveled, but countless hands and hooves working in concert. In the hush of the desert, you feel time itself molded beneath your fingers, fragile, precise, and utterly essential. You wake to the soft murmur of water trickling through cracked stone channels, and without a word, you lead Shanglu toward the welcoming haze of an oasis, a miniature green kingdom in the endless amber sea. The palms rustle overhead as other postmen cluster around low walls, their camels drinking deeply, heads bobbing like sleepy rotary pumps. You take a deep breath, savoring the earthy freshness, and realize that oasis routines are as ritualized as any imperial ceremony. A mainstream historical fact: Silk Route oases like Turpan and Khotan maintained strict water rights protocols, ensuring each caravan received its fair share of well water, documented in travel logs kept by local governors. You approach a stone basin marked with faded inscriptions, dipping a gourd into the cool stream. Water tastes of moss and minerals, far superior to the leather pouches sloshing stale drips on your back. Historians still argue whether these inscriptions imposed equal quotas or favored caravans bearing official seals, but every postman knew better than to challenge a local sheikh's verdict at dawn. A fringe tidbit whispers that some oasis keepers buried small ceramic idols at the well's bottom, claiming they purified water by scaring away scorpions, though most scholars dismiss this as elaborate folklore designed to bolster local temple revenues. You peer into the basin's shadowy depths, half expecting tiny statues with outsider complex, but see only ripples and your own tired reflection. You step onto a low platform where a handful of couriers trade commentary in hushed tones. One unrolls a slender parchment depicting water etiquette diagrams. Bow, pour 3 drops onto the sand as libation, then sip, never guzzle. You mimic the gesture, letting 3 droplets slip through your fingers, creating little amber teardrops on golden grains. Joke 1. You feel like you've just performed some ancient hydration ballet. Nearby, a postman offers you a plate of dates and candied melon, emergency fuel for the next desert expanse. You pop a date in your mouth, its sticky sweetness clinging to your teeth, and marvel at how something so simple can feel like a royal feast. Fringe rumor claims certain dates were anointed with honey from wild bees that nested beneath palm fronds, believed to boost endurance, though historians still argue whether this superfood status was marketing by date merchant guilds. As you sit on a low stone bench, the breeze carries laughter from a cluster of merchants lounging under silk canopies. They swap gossip about distant courts, while postmen quietly swap notes on upcoming dunes and hidden springs. You overhear a debate. Are these springs seasonal mirages or genuine aquifers tapped by ancient engineers? Historians still argue whether clever channeling or pure luck created year-round water sources, but you're too polite to interrupt their scholarly jousting. You rise to check on Xiang Lu, brushing a stray tuft of hair from the camel's hump. Its coat gleams in the sunbeams filtering through palm fronds. Joke 2. You've spent half this journey worrying about your own hair, and the other half envying your camel's low-maintenance grooming routine. You refill the beast's feed bag from a burlap sack of barley, noting how local farmers keep track of water usage by tallying barley quotas, another layer of oasis bureaucracy. Walking back toward the communal trough, you catch sight of a weathered stone marker carved with a simple scale: 1 bucket per camel, 6 buckets per courier. You heft your gourd for a second pour, appreciating the fairness of the system, most of the time. Fringe tales claim a few sheikhs extended the scale when caravans carried exotic goods, though most travelers dismiss these stories as exaggerated customs duties. Historians still argue whether animal favoritisms ever truly skewed water distribution. You lean against the shaded wall, cracking open a sun-warmed flatbread dipped in honey. The sticky crumbs drift down like golden snow onto your lap. Joke 3. In a world of dried rations, honey and bread feel like you've discovered manna from a desert sky. As you chew thoughtfully, you observe the oasis' unspoken timetable, a gentle lull from mid-morning heat, then renewed activity as the sun inches west. Across the pool, postmen exchange leather strips and wax tablets, comparing progress and teasing about who skipped a notch by accident. You notice anxiety flicker in someone's eyes when a tablet fragment cracks, one less day accounted for. You offer a spare strip from your own cartridge, cementing a moment of desert camaraderie. As shade lengthens, you stand and pat your camel, refreshed by the water's cool embrace. Ahead lie shifting dunes and baked stone passes, but for now, the oasis has granted you reprieve and subtle lessons in cooperation. The local well-keeper tips his hat, a silent sign of respect, and you nod in return, feeling a quiet bond between stranger and sentinel. You shoulder your pack, savoring that final sip of moss-tinted water before stepping back into the shimmering haze. The palms whisper farewell, and you promise yourself you'll carry this shared tranquility in your heart when the desert wind returns. With that, you remount Xianglu, ready to resume your measured trek across time and sand. You squint against the late afternoon glare as the caravan pivots onto a rocky incline, the air thinning with every labored step. Soon you're climbing the Pamir Plateau, known as the roof of the world, and you notice how Xianglu's humps seem to sag under the strain of altitude. You probably won't find Starbucks up here, but you will discover that every hoofbeat echoes a reminder. This is where endurance meets elevation. A mainstream historical fact, Silk Route postmen routinely navigated the Pamir passes at altitudes over 4,000 meters, relying on hardy Bactrian camels adapted for cold and low oxygen. You pause to catch your breath, watching clouds drift below you like distant caravans of their own. Historians still argue whether the postmen built temporary stone cairns to mark each day's climb or simply trusted memory and worn cairns from earlier travelers. A fringe tidbit, some traders claimed that local Waki musicians played bamboo flutes at high camps, breathing melodies into the thin air that purportedly boosted camel lung capacity. Though most scholars dismiss this as romantic folklore rather than effective altitude training. You smile, imagining camels humming along to flute tunes, perhaps composing their own mountain jazz. Joke 1. Nothing like a bit of improvisational camel cool jazz to power you up a mountain. You guide your camel toward a narrow ledge carved into the mountain, feeling gravel shift under hoof. Your water flask feels lighter than yesterday's chilled oasis supply, and you crack it open for a swig that tastes faintly of metal and fear. Yet the view is stunning. Jagged peaks wreathed in snow, ridges folding into distant valleys you've yet to explore. A gentle breeze chills your sweat-soaked shirt, reminding you that this climb is a delicate dance with frost and fatigue. At a small camp of stone huts, half sunken into the earth by centuries of wind, you meet fellow postmen huddled over steaming bowls of barley porridge. The camp leader offers you a spoonful, the hot grains clinging to your lips, and you realize this humble meal is as vital as any imperial edict. Fringe whispers say some caravans brewed porridge with wild juniper needles to stave off altitude sickness, but modern scholars still argue whether the needles' oils did more harm than good. You spoon another bite, deciding any flavor is better than none at this height. After resting, you tighten your cloak and secure your calendar cartridge. Each leather strip feels stiffer in the cold, brittle with frost. You flip to the next section, notch the chip for today's mile marker, and watch frost crystals glint like tiny diamonds. You wonder if these crystals ever fell into main courtyards back in Chang'an, only to be dismissed as impure snow. Historians still argue whether winter mail runs paused entirely or pressed on through blizzard conditions. You shoulder your pack, taking note of the cairn ahead. Unlike the more deliberate markings of the desert, these stones are stacked haphazardly by travelers over centuries, an organic tapestry of communal guidance. Joke 2. It's like Google Maps, but everyone's hand built the pins. You guide Xianglu toward the cairn, murmuring a silent thanks to all the nameless couriers who built this mountain breadcrumb trail. The wind gusts suddenly, rattling loose stones down the slope. You steady your feet, feeling a surge of adrenaline as you and your camel lean into the breeze. It's here, at the crux of the pass, that you learn the true meaning of partnership between you, the camel, and the mountain itself. A slip could mean a tumble into a gorge, and you push that thought away, focusing instead on the rhythm. One breath, one step, one hoof. You recall a scholarly debate you overheard. Did earlier caravans prefer the lower, longer Akbaital Pass or the steeper but shorter Kargush route? Historians still argue whether the shorter path's risks outweighed its time savings, but your frigid fingers decide that speed is a relative luxury. For now, you're balancing safety against schedule, and that delicate calculus hums through every choice you make. At last, you crest the pass and gaze down into a valley where sunlit grass sways in emerald waves. Your camel exhales a plume of mist, and you whisper a congratulatory, "Good job." Fringe tales claim shamans once performed high-altitude rituals to bless caravans here, scattering prayer flags that flutter in wind, though most researchers note that such rituals were more common on pilgrimage routes than on mail runs. Still, you can't help imagining colorful banners snapping above your head as you descend. The descent is swift. Camels pick up pace on the gentler gradient, hooves clicking against rocky ground. You savor the relief of oxygen-rich air filling your lungs, and you crack a grin. Joke 3. You've officially survived the roof of the world without a single supplemental oxygen tank. As you guide Xianglu toward the valley floor, you realize that these alpine crossings, with their frost and fierce winds, are just another verse in the caravan's ongoing ballad. Below, a cluster of yurts and a plump spring await, promising warmth, supper, and a chance to rest before the next desert horizon. You tuck away your pack, secure your calendar, and let the valley's calm welcome you back to breathable air, if only for a moment. You pick your way through a grove of scrub pine as the late morning sun slides past its zenith, and you can't help but notice the caravan's mood shift. Eyes narrow, grips tighten on leather reins. Bandits skulk these trade arteries like unwelcome toads, and you're about to learn every postman's secret defense, from coded pouches to protective rituals, and if you're lucky, a ghostly dispatch guard or two. A mainstream historical fact: imperial edicts from the 8th century mandated that official mail be carried in lacquered pouches stamped with the emperor's phoenix seal, granting the courier semi-diplomatic immunity. Even bandits were said to hesitate before slicing open a pouch bearing that mark. You finger the tiny phoenix, its wings curving protectively around a silk-lined letter inside. Historians still argue whether this seal of safety was more deterrent than legal fiction, but every courier carried one just in case. You crouch beside your camel as the lead postman produces a small hide pouch, no larger than a plum, tied tight with crimson cord. Inside lies your most precious cargo: ciphered messages bound in beeswax. Fringe lore claims these ciphers were crafted by hermit scholars who whispered incantations over each seal, ensuring only the true recipient could break the wax without summoning ill fate. Skeptical voices in dusty university halls dismiss such rituals as romantic fluff, but you can't shake the memory of that storyteller in Turpan who swore she witnessed a bandit freeze mid-cut, eyes wide, before dropping the wax tablet in terror. You lean close as the postman chips away a corner of the hardened wax with a silver awl, revealing neat rows of black ink in an elegant script. He murmurs, "Always burn the outer wax first. Never risk reading under moonlight." You nod, but inwardly wonder, beyond diplomatic seals and wax ciphers, how else did they keep bandits at bay? Joke 1. You always thought encryption was a modern term, yet here you are, unwrapping a medieval USB drive. The comparison brings a wry grin to your lips. Nearby, another courier murmurs a protective charm under his breath and sprinkles powdered camphor around his saddle. Historians still argue whether camphor's strong scent truly repelled thieves, or merely masked the scent of horses and camels, making it harder for trackers to follow the caravan's trail. You pinch your nose at the pungent aroma. Sure enough, you could smell it half a mile before you saw the camphor crystals. As you remount Xianglu, you recall ghost guide legends whispered around campfires. Fringe storytellers claim that at dusk, phantom riders draped in translucent robes joined the caravan's rear guard, their lamps glowing with cold blue fire. Bandits who dared pursue found only empty desert and a single payao, an old guide's walking stick, left behind. Historians still argue whether these tales originated from masked night riders hired by wealthy merchants or were born of genuine spectral encounters. You shiver, even though the sun is still high. A sudden rustle in the underbrush halts your thoughts. You grasp the reins as the caravan halts, hooves stamping in tight unison. The lead postman lifts a hand, signaling silence. You tug out a small copper whistle, blowing 3 quick trills, the agreed alarm code. Moments later, 3 mounted guards emerge from a rocky copse, eyes steely, spears glinting. Lesson learned: it pays to carry both cipher and signal. Joke 2. It's like a medieval panic button, except it's made of copper and actually works. You can't help but admire the elegance of such simple tech. Once the guards merge silently with the caravan's edge, you slip your whistle back into your belt and settle into a steady gait. The talk turns to protective rituals. Some postmen swore by wearing a single red glove to confuse attackers into thinking they'd been cursed. Fringe anecdotes even tell of couriers anointing their boots with powdered serpent scales, claim to make their footsteps sound like slithering snakes, sending bandits scuttling away in panic. Most academics scoff, but you've seen enough desert oddities to leave room for doubt. Historians still argue whether these eccentric precautions ever halted an actual bandit attack or were simply morale boosters on long nights under the stars. You cup your hand to your mouth, voice low as you jest. Next time, I'll pack a snake charmer just for safety. The group chuckles softly, the tension easing as your humor weaves them back into camaraderie. By midday, the caravan breaks through a rocky pass into a sun-drenched valley. You pat Shanglu's neck, feeling its warm pulse under your palm, reassuring, dependable. You tuck the phoenix-sealed pouch safely inside your tunic, mindful of its dual role as postal protection and psychological shield. In the distance, jagged stone spires frame the path ahead, a likely ambush spot if legends hold true. But with your coded messages, imperial seals, and camphor trail, you feel ready. After all, you're not just a courier, you're a mobile fortress of ink, iron, and whispered spells. As the caravan edges into the valley's shadow, the interplay of ancient law, cunning cipher, and a dash of superstition ensures you'll arrive unmolested, or at least merrily entertained trying. Spices hang in the air like secret promises as your caravan threads through the sun-scorched lowlands, and you realize that every grain of saffron or kernel of pepper clutched in those burlap sacks is time-sensitive cargo demanding punctual delivery. You lean forward, inhaling the faint aroma of turmeric wafting from a nearby crate. It tingles your nose and teases awake memories of Chinese kitchens back home. A mainstream historical fact: demands from imperial courts in Samarkand and Baghdad created strict delivery windows for aromatic goods, with fines imposed if saffron arrived stale or black pepper lost its pungency. Merchants kept ledgers tracking each parcel's dispatch date and estimated shelf life. Historians still argue whether those fines funded palace banquets or lined local governors' pockets, but every postman knew the price of tardiness. You scan the caravan's spice-laden camels, each bearing carefully labeled wicker baskets. Fringe lore suggests some couriers added crushed mint leaves to pepper shipments, claiming it preserved spice potency by fooling bacteria, though scholarly treatises dismiss this as digestive aid myth rather than preservation science. You roll a mint leaf between your fingers and sniff its sharp freshness, wondering if it doubles as gum for bored desert travelers. Joke 1: when life gives you Mizuna, make minted. A trader at your side holds a small hourglass, turning it once for every 15 miles. The sands inside shift in a hypnotic dance, reminding postmen to check their cargo's condition at regular intervals. Historians still argue whether hourglasses were common on long routes or luxury gear reserved for high-status couriers. You tilt the glass, watching the last grain slip through a constricting neck, tick, 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 like nature's own delivery countdown. You pause to inspect a crate of saffron threads, their crimson filaments nestled in straw like jewels. The lead courier opens the wicker lid, exposing a treasure trove shimmering in the sun. He invites you to rub a single strand between your thumb and forefinger. Its scent bursts forth, floral and earthy. He warns you that saffron's volatile aromatics fade after 2 weeks in transit. One late shipment reportedly inspired an emperor to remark that his stew smelled of regret. Fringe accounts add that some postmen dyed threads with beetroot juice to appear fresher, though most scholars scoff at anyone risking royal ire. Joke 2: nothing says royal scandal like magenta horse feed passed off as precious herb. You laugh softly, mindful of maintaining dignified posture, lest you start a saffron-stained joke riot. As the caravan trudges through a narrow defile, you notice each basket features a small wax seal, matching the calendar tablet's red ink, to signal when the crate was packed. You nod appreciatively, a clever double check against subtle spoilage. Historians still argue whether those seals were standardized across regions, or if each courier improvised unique markings. Either way, that dab of wax holds the weight of imperial reputation. The path widens into a fertile plain dotted with date palms and irrigated fields. You catch sight of local farmers tending pepper vines, their hands stained purple from handling ripe pods. You dismount to stretch, plucking a single green peppercorn and popping it into your mouth. It crackles with faint heat, an invigorating jolt that momentarily banishes sleepiness. Fringe stories suggest peppercorns also acted as makeshift currency in remote stops, traders swapping handfuls for water rations. Historians still argue if pepper ever truly matched gold's value in those lonely markets. You remount Xianglu and adjust the spice basket straps, feeling the weight shift with each sway. You reflect on how timing governed every aspect of this aromatic odyssey. Celestial navigation to reach specific spice-growing valleys by dawn, leather calendars to avoid late penalties, and hourglasses to ensure crates stayed crisp. Joke 3. It's the only job where you really can smell your paycheck. A distant minaret's call to prayer echoes across the plain, rippling through the caravan like a musical cue to resume. You guide Xianglu forward, pepper and saffron scents mingling in the warming air. Each breath reminds you that spices aren't mere seasoning. They're tardy delivery triggers, reputation keepers, and the fragrant heartbeat of empires. Ahead, the road curves toward a bustling way station renowned for its spice bazaars. You'll rest, resupply, and perhaps compare which mint-infused pepper trick works best. For now, you ride on, guided by aroma and the ticking hourglass of urgency, weaving time and taste into history's grand tapestry. The midday sun feels hotter now as you steer Xianglu out of the spice plains and into a region where calendars collide. Ancient systems of counting days that shift under your saddle like mischievous tricksters. You probably won't find an easy conversion chart here, but you'll witness firsthand how postmen juggled Chinese lunisolar months, Sasanian solar reckonings, and the nascent Islamic lunar calendar, all while keeping imperial deadlines in check. You slip off your camel and fan open a compact wooden disc, your personal conversion compass, carved with overlapping rings of characters denoting months in different realms. A mainstream historical fact, Tang couriers crossing into the Sogdian territories encountered the Yazdigar III calendar, a solar system with 12 fixed months, requiring careful adjustment from their own variable-length lunisolar months. You align the Chinese second month marker with Sogdian Ardi-Behesht, mentally noting today's date in both systems. Historians still argue whether these conversion discs were officially issued by the Tang court or improvised by savvy merchants along the way. A fringe tidbit suggests some postmen carried crushed moonstone dust in tiny vials, believing its glow under night skies helped sync lunar reckonings when tablets fell foul of sand or rain, though serious scholars dismiss moonstone as a mystic marketing ploy rather than practical tool. You twist the vial open and glimpse a few glittering specks, pondering if they'd help you calculate the next full moon or just add sparkle to your camel feed. You pat Xianglu's broad flank and recall the little leather calendar cartridges you've been flipping since Section 4, except now you insert extra strips for the Islamic months, which shift about 11 days earlier each solar year. The wax notches must represent these drifts too, or you risk arriving before Ramadan ends or after Nowruz celebrations conclude. Joke 1. When you miss a date, you can blame it on an overeager lunar cycle. Nearby, two couriers hunch over a battered manuscript, an unofficial timetable of empires listing Chinese, Sasanian, and Hijri dates side by side. They murmur about month X corresponding to month Y, tracing lines between columns like sleepy geometry students. Historians still argue whether such manuscripts were copied from imperial archives or improvised by caravan scholars desperate for clarity. You lean in, offering to compare notes, but they shush you with polite smiles, guarding their precious scroll as if it were saffron. You wander to the edge of the camp and trace a finger along a stone marker carved with dual inscriptions, a Chinese date on one side, a Parthian numeral on the other. This bilingual milestone embodies the conundrum. A single trip might span months that don't exist in one system and overflow days in another. Fringe storytellers claim a lost caravan once built its own calendar tower at a remote pass, marking each sunrise and sunset until the calendars realigned. But most researchers dismiss this as a fanciful allegory on imperial overreach. As the sun sinks low, you set up a small sundial beside your saddle, aligning its gnomon to true north by Polaris. The shadow slides into the third hour, an immediate check against your conversion disk. Joke 2. It's the only job where you consult 3 calendars and a shadow puppet to tell you when to sleep. You carve a tiny notch in your wax tablet for the Chinese month, then flip a leather strip for the Sogdian month, and finally rotate a small bead for the Hijri date. 3 notches for 1 day, 3 times the satisfaction. A breeze rattles the camp's lanterns, and you notice the debts you owe to earlier sections. Your camel's steady gait, Section 2, the wax cartridges, Section 4, and even that star-guided night, Section 3, all play into this complex timekeeping tapestry. You smile at the memory of chanting flashcards under the stars, grateful you no longer need to recite Dubhe and Merak on every date conversion. Historians still argue whether postmen prioritized local court calendars or defaulted to the Tang imperial lunisolar system when passing through minor outposts. You recline on a saddle cushion, crossing your legs as if in a modern armchair, and imagine a bureaucrat back in Chang'an scratching his head. Did they really deliver my dispatch on the 11th day of the moon or the 5th day of the sun? You lean closer to the conversion disk, flicking a tiny brass lever that reveals a hidden inscription. Time bends for those who bend with it. You raise an eyebrow at the eccentric phrasing, another fringe flourish from the itinerant craftsman of calendar tools. Yet, as you watch a guard update the camp's central log in 3 scripts, Chinese characters, Pahlavi script, and a crude Kufic script, you feel a profound respect for these unsung mathematicians of the desert. Joke 3. It's the world's slowest spreadsheet, but with far better camel-themed cell names. You close your eyes, picturing dancing notches and swiveling rings, then nod to yourself. Tomorrow, you'll herald the calendar's reconciliation at the next caravanserai feast. As twilight deepens, you pocket the conversion disk and step back into the lantern-lit circle of couriers. They offer you a steaming mug of rice wine and murmur appreciation for your contributions. Perhaps because you pointed out that today was both the 7th day of the 3rd Chinese month and the 14th of Jumada al-Thani. You sip the wine, tasting its warmth, and let the camp's soft banter lull you towards sleep. In this twilight of calendars, you grasp how history isn't just measured in years, but in the delicate dance of dates across borders. And as you lean against Xianglu's flank, you realize that whether by stars, tablets, or carved stone, time moves forward as surely as the camel's footsteps. You guide Xianglu's reins as the sun's first rays flicker over distant dunes, feeling the familiar cadence of camel hooves beneath you, and sensing that this ancient rhythm now echoes through modern arteries of trade. Today, you'll witness how the simple logic of leather strips and wax notches has woven its way into the algorithms that power today's global logistics networks. A mainstream historical fact, many courier practices from the Silk Route, like fixed rest intervals and waypoint markers, were recorded in 9th century Tang administrative manuals, forming the earliest known frameworks for scheduled deliveries. You grip your camel's mane and imagine those scribes, quill in hand, tallying milestones much as modern operations managers configure delivery windows. Historians still argue whether these manuals influenced later European postal reforms or remained confined to Eurasian trade corridors. You pat Xianglu's flank, recalling how each leather calendar strip once guaranteed arrival predictions within a day's margin. Fringe engineers suggest that today's just-in-time supply chains owe more to camel calendars than to modern computer models, claiming that algorithmic buffers mirror the ancient 8-hour pace cycles. Skeptical operations scholars dismiss this as romantic back projection, yet you can't deny a certain poetic symmetry. Both systems balance speed, rest, and resource constraints. You shift in your saddle as the caravan slows near a modern highway's distant glimmer, trucks trundling along asphalt, digital displays tracking every pallet. Joke 1. You half expect a trucker to ask for a wax tablet instead of a GPS reroute. You smile, recognizing the same need for progress bars, just rendered in bytes rather than notches. Nearby, a logistics consultant you met en route shows you a tablet computer running route optimization software. He taps icons that represent depots, fuel stops, and driver rest periods, eerily akin to your leather calendar's loops and wax dabs. You lean in, watching color-coded segments snap into place, and realize that your Camel's 8-hour stride now lives on as mandatory rest breaks for drivers under international transport law. Historians still argue whether modern regulations directly trace back to Tang Couriers or emerged independently during the 20th century mechanization boom. You rub your eyes, catching the sunrise's glow on a distant freight rail yard. Containers stacked like giant dominoes await their turn, each tagged with barcodes instead of seals. Fringe supply chain gurus argue that barcode scanning is just an electronic evolution of the Imperial Phoenix seal, a way to ensure authenticity and traceability. You chuckle. Joke 2. Next time, you'll pack a barcode scanner instead of camphor. As the caravan edges closer to a towering overpass, you consider how artificial intelligence models feed on real-time data, much like postmen once relied on bell chime alerts. You press a finger to Xianglu's bell, its chime still as honest and immediate as a cloud server ping. It reminds you that no matter how advanced our systems become, the basics of signaling can remain astonishingly simple. You breathe in the mingled scents of diesel exhaust and desert wind, acknowledging that centuries have changed the vehicles, but not the principles: rest interval scheduling, progress tracking, cargo integrity, and contingency buffers. Joke 3. Whether it's camels or cargo ships, someone always wants to know, where's my package? You pull your wax tablet from your cloak one last time, tracing the final notch you'll make on this Silk Route odyssey. As you slide it back into place, you feel the weight of history's continuum, one notch at a time. And with that humble flick of leather and wax, you realize that the world's supply chains still march to a camel's ancient heartbeat. Wind down. Now, as the caravan's echoes fade and the morning light softens your edges, allow your thoughts to drift gently across the dunes of memory. You've ridden starlit nights, charted shifting calendars, and crossed mountain roofs, yet this quiet moment feels like the truest journey within yourself. Let your breath match the slow rise and fall of camel humps, each inhale a step forward, each exhale a release of worldly cares. In this hushed interlude, time itself seems to yield. No more notches to carve, no more bells to ring. Only the soft patter of heartbeats aligning with ancient rhythms. Historians still argue whether the Silk Route ever truly ended or simply transformed. But here, in this tranquil pause, it continues in your thoughts. You're both courier and recipient, carrying memories like letters sealed in wax, awaiting careful unsealing. Feel the warmth of distant suns dissolve any tension, the soft perfume of desert blooms lingering like a whispered farewell. Allow the sand's infinite horizon to widen your mind's eye, offering solace in the endless stretch ahead. You are safe, you are grounded, you are part of a story woven across centuries. Breathe, rest. Let the final curtain of twilight descend upon your consciousness, replacing ambition with acceptance, hurry with harmony. Soon, the dunes will whisper their last lullaby, urging you toward dreams uncharted. End of script. Wish you health and happiness.